Cracks in the facade. 2 months into their arrangement, Nisha and Vikram had developed an unexpected rhythm. Weekday mornings, she would leave coffee by his office door before heading to manage her spice shop, which, true to his word, was undergoing careful renovation under historical preservation guidelines. Evenings, she would often cook, the kitchen gradually accumulating proper spices and tools. Vikram would emerge from his work cocoon, sometimes even setting aside his phone during meals. Their public appearances had become more natural. The stiff poses in their early photos had evolved into something that, from the outside, might actually pass for companionship. The Meridian executives had been thoroughly convinced, particularly after a dinner where Vikram had casually mentioned how Nisha had taught him to distinguish between Kashmiri and Degi chilies by scent alone. It was all for show, Nisha reminded herself regularly, especially when she caught herself looking forward to their scheduled events. Tonight was a charity gala, another performance on their social calendar. Nisha adjusted her midnight blue sari, adorned with subtle silver threadwork, and stepped into the living room where Vikram waited. His expression shifted when he saw her, a momentary break in his composed facade. "You look..." He paused, seemingly searching for an appropriate word. "Perfect for tonight's event." The compliment, clinical as it was, still made something flutter in her chest. She'd grown adept at reading the micro-expressions that crossed his face, the slight crease between his brows when he was concerned, the barely perceptible softening around his eyes when something pleased him. At the gala, Nisha found herself approached by Kiran Mehra, a shrewd businesswoman known for her network of luxury hotels. "So you're the miracle worker," Kiran said, eyeing Nisha over her champagne glass. "I'm sorry? The woman who somehow got Vikram Dewan to see beyond balance sheets." Kiran glanced across the room where Vikram was speaking with investors. "I've known him for years. He was always brilliant but ruthless. Now his company is suddenly preserving historical buildings instead of demolishing them, establishing community grant programs." She smiled knowingly. People change when they find something worth changing for. Before Nisha could process this information, Vikram appeared at her side, his hand finding the small of her back with practiced ease. "I see you've met my wife," he said to Kiran, the word wife rolling off his tongue without a hint of hesitation. Later that night, as they rode home in comfortable silence, Nisha gathered her courage. "Is it true your company has started community preservation programs?" Vikram looked momentarily surprised, then shrugged. "It's good business. Corporate social responsibility improves public image. Is that the only reason?" His eyes met hers, then darted away. What other reason would there be? The following Tuesday, Nisha closed the shop early, caught in a sudden monsoon downpour. Arriving at the penthouse drenched, she found Vikram in the kitchen, awkwardly attempting to recreate her butter chicken recipe. "What are you doing?" she asked, dripping on the imported marble tiles. He looked up, a smudge of turmeric on his cheek. "You mentioned having dinner with your aunt tonight. I thought I'd..." He gestured vaguely at the chaotic countertop. "Feed myself." The scene was so incongruous, Vikram Dewan, terror of the business world, frowning in concentration as he measured out spices, that Nisha couldn't help laughing. His expression of mild offense only made her laugh harder. "Here," she said, taking the wooden spoon from him. "You've got the sequence wrong. Whole spices first, then aromatics." Standing beside him, guiding his hand as he stirred, Nisha became acutely aware of how domestic the moment felt, and how dangerously comfortable. The rain intensified, beating against the windows. "Your aunt will worry if you go out in this," Vikram said quietly. "Call her. Stay home tonight." Home. The word hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to acknowledge. That weekend, Nisha discovered a photo frame on Vikram's desk, their official wedding portrait. A staged photo for a staged marriage, but why display it in his private space where no business associates would see? The cracks in their carefully constructed facade were widening. That evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset paint Mumbai's skyline in gold, Vikram broke their companionable silence. "My mother had a shop once, smaller than yours. She sold hand-woven textiles." His voice was soft, contemplative. "It was demolished for an office complex when I was 12. She never quite recovered from losing it." Nisha turned to him, seeing something new in his profile. "Vulnerability. Is that why you agreed to save my shop?" "Perhaps." He met her gaze. Or perhaps I'm just keeping my end of a business arrangement. But there was something in his eyes that contradicted his words. Something that made Nisha suddenly afraid. Not of him, but of the growing realization that their paper marriage had developed substance neither had anticipated. That night, lying awake, Nisha faced an uncomfortable truth. Somewhere between contract clauses and pretend smiles, she had begun to care for the man whose ring she wore for convenience. The man whose walls were slowly crumbling, revealing glimpses of someone worth knowing beneath the ruthless businessman. And in 4 months, according to their contract, it would all be over. Betrayal and truth. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Nisha had stopped by Vikram's office to drop off lunch, a habit she'd fallen into without realizing it. As she approached his assistant's desk, she overheard voices from the conference room. "The Patel Street development is our priority once the Meridian deal closes," a male voice declared. "We've secured most properties already. What about that spice shop?" someone asked. "The one Vikram's wife owns?" Laughter followed. "That's the genius part. Once they're divorced, we'll have legal grounds to challenge any previous agreements. The historical designation can be appealed." The voices faded as blood rushed to Nisha's ears. She stepped back, lunch bag clutched in white-knuckled fingers, and walked numbly to the elevator. It had all been a lie, a more elaborate deception than she'd realized. Not just a temporary marriage to impress investors, but a calculated move to neutralize her resistance. Once the contract ended, once she was no longer Mrs. Dewan, her shop would be just another acquisition. At the penthouse, Nisha packed methodically, tears blurring her vision. The green shawl, the small gifts, the moments she'd mistaken for genuine connection, all part of the performance. She left her key and wedding ring on the kitchen counter with a note. Contract terminated. For 3 days, she stayed with her aunt, ignoring Vikram's calls and messages. On the 4th day, he appeared at the shop. "You didn't let me explain," he said, standing awkwardly among shelves of spices, looking strangely diminished without his usual corporate armor. "Your development team explained plenty." Nisha continued weighing cardamom pods, refusing to meet his eyes. "Congratulations on your comprehensive strategy." "I didn't know," he insisted. "That plan was from before what? Before you needed a convenient wife? Before you realized how useful I could be?" She finally looked at him. "Was any of it real, Vikram?" The question hung between them. For once, the eloquent businessman seemed at a loss for words. "That's what I thought," she said softly. "Our contract has 4 weeks left. Consider it voided." "Nisha, please leave." After he'd gone, she closed early, walking to the renovated courtyard behind the shop where generations of her family had gathered. The improvements Vikram had authorized were beautiful, tasteful lighting highlighting the ancient neem tree, restored stone benches. Had that been part of the deception too, or something more? 2 days later, Mumbai's business community was rocked by breaking news. Vikram Dewan had pulled out of the Meridian deal, citing fundamental differences in development philosophy. More shocking still, he had announced a complete restructuring of Dewan Development's approach to urban projects, emphasizing historical preservation and community integration. The financial papers called it corporate suicide. His board called for his resignation. And still, Nisha maintained her silence. Until the morning she opened the shop to find a small wooden box on the counter. Inside lay a single key and a document, the deed to her building transferred solely to her name, with a perpetual historical designation that couldn't be challenged. Attached was a handwritten note. "Some promises are worth keeping, even when the contract ends." The ultimatum. Nisha Sharma wiped her hands on her apron, the familiar scent of cardamom and cinnamon clinging to her fingers as she flipped the closed sign on the door of Sharma's Spice Emporium. At 28, she hadn't imagined she'd be the sole keeper of her family's legacy. A shop that had stood in this corner of Mumbai for 3 generations, surviving everything from political upheavals to economic downturns, until now. The letter had arrived that morning, another in a series of increasingly aggressive offers from Dewan Developments. This time it wasn't an offer but a notice. The entire block had been purchased for redevelopment. They had 30 days. "We won't go down without a fight." Nisha murmured to the framed photograph of her late parents that hung behind the antique cash register. The shop wasn't just a business. It was the physical embodiment of her family story in India, each wooden shelf and brass scale holding memories money couldn't buy. The next morning, Nisha strode through the gleaming lobby of Dewan Tower, a monument to glass and steel that seemed designed to intimidate people like her. "I need to see Vikram Dewan," she announced to the receptionist, who looked at her simple cotton salwar kameez with barely concealed disdain. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he'll want to hear what I have to say before he destroys my family's legacy." A deep voice from behind her made Nisha freeze. And what legacy would that be? She turned to find herself facing a man who could only be Vikram Dewan himself. At 34, he had the confident posture of someone who'd never been told no in his life. His tailored suit probably cost more than her shop made in a month, but it was his eyes that caught her attention. Dark, intelligent, and oddly hollow. Sharma's Spice Emporium. "The shop your company is trying to bulldoze for another soulless mall." A flicker of recognition crossed his face. "The holdout on Patel Street. Follow me." Minutes later, in his penthouse office overlooking the city, Nisha made her case with passion that surprised even herself. "That shop is more than property to us. It's where my grandfather taught my father to identify 30 types of chili by scent alone, where my mother created our famous masala blend that people come from across the city to buy." Vikram leaned back in his chair, studying her with unexpected intensity. "Ms. Sharma, sentimentality doesn't change facts. That block is prime real estate. There are other blocks, other spaces. This is our home." Something shifted in his expression, so subtle she almost missed it. "Actually, there might be a solution that works for both of us." He stood, walking to the window. "I need a wife," Nisha blinked. "Excuse me?" "Temporarily," he clarified, turning to face her. "The Meridian Hotel Group is looking for an Indian partner for their Asian expansion. Their traditional, value family businesses stability. Being an unmarried workaholic isn't the image they want." Understanding dawned on her with horrifying clarity. "You want to hire me as a fake wife? For 6 months. We appear married, attend some events, convince Meridian I'm settled. In return, I'll not only spare your shop but renovate the entire building. Upgraded facilities, historical designation, the works." Nisha stood up, indignant. "That's insane." "I don't know you. I don't even like you." Vikram smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You don't have to like me. You just have to save your family's legacy. Think about it. 6 months of pretend for generations of security. And if I refuse?" His expression hardened. "Then the demolition begins in 30 days. Nisha felt her world tilting on its axis. This had to be some kind of sick joke. "Why me? You're authentic, passionate. Exactly what Meridian would expect me to fall for if I ever took time away from building my empire." He held out a business card. "You have 24 hours to decide." Nisha took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. "This is blackmail. This is business," he countered, with a generous offer attached. As she walked out of his office, Nisha felt the weight of generations on her shoulders. The shop wasn't just hers to lose, it belonged to her past and her future. How far was she willing to go to protect it? And why did the most impossible choice of her life have to come from a man whose cold ambition was matched only by his undeniable allure? Paper hearts. The marriage certificate felt unnaturally heavy in Nisha's hands. The ink had barely dried. Her new signature, Nisha Dewan, looking like a stranger's handwriting. The courthouse ceremony had been clinical. No flowers, no family, just a disinterested clerk and Vikram's stone-faced lawyer witnessing what should have been the most sacred day of her life. "The papers are filed," Vikram said, checking his watch. "My driver will take you to collect your things. Be at the penthouse by 7. Nisha stared at him. "That's it? Be at the penthouse by 7? We just got married." "On paper," he corrected, already scrolling through emails on his phone. "The contract we signed outlines everything. Separate bedrooms, joint appearances, scheduled dinners twice weekly. The Meridian executives arrive next week." As his sleek car pulled away, leaving her on the courthouse steps, Nisha wondered what madness had possessed her to agree. The written contract had been 10 pages of clinical terms. What to wear, how to behave, the precise nature of affection that was permitted in public. Hand-holding, occasional chaste kisses, nothing more. That evening, a security guard escorted her through the private elevator to Vikram's penthouse. The apartment was exactly what she'd expected: minimalist, expensive, and utterly impersonal. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Mumbai's glittering skyline. Modern art adorned walls that had probably never heard laughter, and not a single photograph suggested human connection. "Your room," Vikram said, appearing suddenly in an unbuttoned dress shirt, gesturing to a door. "The closet has been stocked with appropriate attire for upcoming events." "I have clothes," Nisha protested. "Not for the circles we'll be moving in." His tone left no room for argument. "Dinner is at 8. The housekeeper left it in the warming drawer. Before she could respond, his phone rang, and he disappeared into his home office. The appropriate attire turned out to be designer saris, Western dresses, and jewelry that made her palms sweat thinking about their value. A handwritten note from a personal shopper included her exact measurements. How long had Vikram been planning this? Had he investigated her before she'd even walked into his office? At dinner, a silent affair where Vikram reviewed documents between bites, she finally broke the ice. "Don't you think we should know something about each other? What if someone asks how we met? We met through mutual business interests. You impressed me with your passion for tradition and authenticity." Romance blossomed quickly. He delivered the fiction without looking up. "That's not very convincing. It doesn't need to be Shakespeare. Just believable enough for businessmen who want to feel good about giving me their money." He finally met her gaze. "What's your favorite color?" The random question startled her. "What? If someone asked me about my wife, I should know the basics." "Color? Green," she answered automatically. "Deep forest green." He nodded once as if filing it away. "Any allergies I should know about?" "Medical conditions?" "No allergies. No conditions." "My turn. Why is this Meridian deal so important you'd create a fictional marriage?" Something flickered in his eyes. "It's the culmination of 15 years of work. Meridian doesn't just represent money. It represents legitimacy on a global scale." 3 days into their arrangement, Nisha was going stir-crazy in the sterile penthouse. She escaped to her shop, spending the afternoon organizing inventory, the familiar scents centering her. When she returned, she found Vikram in the kitchen, staring into the refrigerator like it contained encrypted messages. "The housekeeper is off today," he said, sounding genuinely perplexed. Nisha bit back a smile. "Have you never made your own dinner?" His silence was answer enough. "Move," she said, nudging him aside. "I'll cook." An hour later, the penthouse filled with the aromas of her childhood. Cumin, ginger, caramelized onions, and the distinctive punch of her family's garam masala. Vikram appeared, drawn by the scent, watching as she worked. "What is that?" "My mother's buttered chicken recipe." "Set the table." To her surprise, he complied without argument. When they sat down to eat, she watched his expression as he took the first bite. Something remarkable happened. A flash of unguarded pleasure crossed his face, softening the hard lines around his mouth. "This is," he began. "Better than 5-star hotel food," she suggested. "Different," he conceded. "More real." Later that night, as Nisha unpacked the last of her personal belongings, she found a small package on her bed. A cashmere shawl in deep forest green. No note, no explanation. Just the perfect shade of her favorite color. Paper marriages weren't supposed to have moments of thoughtfulness. Paper hearts weren't supposed to skip beats. Yet as she wrapped the soft fabric around her shoulders, Nisha wondered if the lines in their carefully drafted contract were already beginning to blur. Beyond contracts, 3 weeks passed. Nisha expanded the shop, hiring 2 assistants to manage the growing customer base drawn by the renovated historical space. She had not seen or spoken to Vikram since he'd left the deed. Though she'd followed the business news with a conflicted heart, his board had indeed forced him to step down as CEO. The company's stock had plummeted. The man who had built an empire through ruthless efficiency had sacrificed it all for, what? A promise? A shop? Her? On a sunny Tuesday morning, as Nisha demonstrated proper saffron grading to a customer, the shop bell jingled. Vikram stood in the doorway, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, clothing she'd never seen him wear. He looked different, less polished, more human. "We're closing for lunch," she announced to the handful of customers, her voice steadier than she felt. When the shop emptied, they faced each other across the counter that had witnessed her family's history for generations. "You look well," he offered. "You look unemployed," she countered, which unexpectedly made him smile. "Technically, I'm between opportunities." He glanced around the shop. This place suits you. It always did. Why did you do it? Nisha asked, the question that had haunted her for weeks. You lost everything. Vikram's expression softened. Not everything. He took a breath. My mother never recovered from losing her shop because it wasn't just a business to her. It was her heritage, her heart. His eyes met Nisha's. I didn't understand until I saw you here among these jars and spices. Some things can't be measured in profit margins. So this was about your mother? At first, perhaps. He stepped closer. Then it was about a woman who cooked butter chicken in my sterile kitchen and brought warmth into spaces I didn't realize were cold. Who taught me that legacy isn't built with glass towers but with meaning, connection? Nisha's heart thundered in her chest. Our contract is over. I'm not here about contracts. He placed a small spice box on the counter, the kind used in traditional Indian wedding ceremonies. I'm here to ask if we could start again. No papers, no terms, no expiration date. Just two people discovering if what began as pretense might grow into something real. You're assuming a lot, she said, though her fingers traced the carved wood of the spice box. I'm hoping a lot, he corrected. I've built my life on calculated risks, Nisha. But loving you, that's the most uncalculated thing I've ever done. The word loving hung in the air between them. Outside, Mumbai bustled and honked. Inside, time seemed suspended. Nisha opened the spice box. Inside lay 7 small compartments filled with colorful spices, the traditional symbols of a life's journey together. Sweetness, bitterness, richness, sustenance. I'm still angry, she warned. I deserve that. And I don't trust easily. I'll earn it back. She closed the spice box carefully. Start with dinner. Not at the penthouse. Somewhere real, where we're just Vikram and Nisha. No contracts, no pretending. His smile, genuine, hopeful, slightly nervous, was nothing like the practiced charm he'd once deployed. I know a place. A small cafe near your aunt's home. The owner makes excellent masala chai. As they walked out together into the sunlit street, they didn't hold hands or make declarations. Those would come later, built on sturdier foundations than paper contracts. Instead, they walked side by side, two people choosing to begin again, this time with their eyes wide open and their hearts unguarded. No ultimatums, no business deals, just the most ancient of human ventures, the risk of genuine connection. Later that evening, as they lingered over chai, Nisha asked the question that had puzzled her from the beginning. Of all the people you could have chosen for your scheme, why me? Vikram considered this, turning his cup thoughtfully. I told myself it was because you were authentic, passionate, qualities that would impress Meridian. He met her gaze. But I think some part of me recognized something in you that I'd lost along the way, the courage to fight for what matters regardless of the cost. And now, what matters to Vikram Dewan now? He reached across the table, his fingers barely touching hers. Not what, who? Outside the cafe window, Mumbai continued its eternal dance of tradition and progress, of endings and beginnings, much like the two people sitting quietly inside, discovering that sometimes the most binding contracts are the ones written not on paper, but on the heart.